Oh, actually, I do have a question. This one's actually for one of my friends.
Okay.
I can't answer it.
I'm
Recently got a puppy. Doesn't resource guard inside, but started resource guarding randomly with sticks outside. What I'm guessing is don't let them have sticks. But how do you prevent and or stop said resource guarding of something that is not theirs?
Do you know how old the dog is?
Maybe
Guesstimate.
like 18 weeks.
Oh, so still like extremely
Still
young.
a puppy.
Yeah. And what is the dog guarding those things towards the owners?
Towards the owner. So it happened just randomly one day where he just like lunged and growled at her once she took the stick out or was trying to take the stick out, just like they went out.
Okay.
And he hadn't done it before.
So here's the thing with puppies, I think, and preventing certain behavioral issues is you have to understand a couple of things, right? When you first get a young puppy, everything you do with them is management, right? Which means that until you are in a position to address certain things, you cannot allow the dog to rehearse them, right? There's a reason why you don't let your puppy just loose in your house when you first get them is because they're going to piss and shit all over the floor, right? There's a reason why you don't just let your dog off leash in like busy places and stuff like that is because they're going to run off and you're going to have to play keep away and you're not going to be able to catch them and they're going to run into the street. There's a reason why, any number of things could happen, right? You don't have your dog in the same room as your trash can because they're going to start getting into it, et cetera, right? So because of that, what I'm going to look at is, okay, I'm assuming this dog is not trained first. So why is the dog in a position where it's able to get all of these things without your influence of telling them not to do so, right? Why, because if you're not in a position to communicate effectively and the dog is, say, off leash in a backyard, running around picking up all these different things, if it gets something you don't want them to get, it's going to be such a struggle for you to get it back to them. And there are dogs out there that are just very combative. And even though it might not be like the most intense resource guarding that I've ever seen in my life, they're going to try to guard those resources just in a part of that like arousal and game that you're playing with them, right?
Yeah.
So, let's say they're off leash, he gets a stick. First thing I need to do is I need to chase them down to even get to them to get that thing, right? That's creating a bunch of conflict. That's creating a bunch of competition. Then once I finally get the dog, I have to grab them to restrain them, typically speaking, right? Because they're going to run away if I don't do that. That's putting the dog in a position where fight or flight, right? Then I'm reaching in and I'm grabbing that resource or whatever it is. So that's direct competition at that point, right? So all of those things put together immediately puts the dog in a position where they're going to try to do that. They don't really have another option at that point other than just completely submit to their owner, which, let's be frank, like not all dogs are like that.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we solve that problem? First step is you manage it. So if the dog is in the backyard, it has to be on a leash and it has to be attached to you. If you want to give your dog a little bit more freedom, that's fine. You need to get a longer leash then at that point. So cool. If my dog's on a 20-foot leash hanging out in the backyard and I see them get something they're not supposed to, I immediately eliminate all of that bullshit because I can just pick up that leash and reel that dog in, take that thing from them, and guess what? I win. It's not a big fight, right? Second thing you need to do is you need to understand that I need to be able to communicate with my dog more effectively so I can put them in those types of situations I want to. So you start the training process, right? So you manage things until you start training the dog, and then you incrementally remove some of that management to put the dog in situations so you can communicate right from wrong, right? So I start then having the dog loose in the yard when I'm in a position to correct them for picking up those things in a non-confrontational way, right? Then I start just having them totally loose in that yard and allow them to have those things and then practice teaching them to drop it, et cetera, right? But you have to, with a puppy, manage them until you're in a position to do that. And I see so many people that get puppies that they literally treat an 8-week-old puppy like it's like a 4-year-old dog, right? And they allow the dog to just rehearse all of these things because they're not managing things effectively, and they create all of these issues over the course of like a month,
Right.
So how, and this is another thing we wrote down, like when you're teaching that like distinction between like teaching the no, like what does that actually mean to the dog? When you're not using tools, like an e-collar, you're not using a prong collar, how all these different things, like how do you effectively teach that no?
Well, like we talked about, it's not about e-collar or prong collar. Like, with puppies, I'll use pet correctors a lot. I'll pair the no.
What's a pet corrector?
Can of compressed air.
Oh, okay.
So I tried to do that with Frank when he was a puppy, and he said, fuck no.
And it's one of those things like we talked about with the e-collar, right? Physically or mentally dominant dogs, right? There are some dogs that don't care about things like that. They're not startled easily.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, with those dogs, it's not going to be the most effective thing in the world. But for some puppies, it is, right? For other ones, I'll pair the no-in with, you know, I always do with a really young dog with biting, the tooth lip curl, right? So I'll grab their lip, I'll curl it over their tooth, and I'll squeeze down really hard, right? And
That's interesting. I've never heard of
yeah,
that.
so I'll say no, grab it, and they're like, I don't like that, you know? So they start learning that they don't like that thing. Bonkers are very, very, very effective with puppies, right? And you can make little puppy ones, you know? Where, you know, you could use a little hand towel that you roll up that the dog is something you don't like. No, throw it at him, right? You could use, there's a trainer out there. Actually, it was Sean, the good dog. He made a post with, he got a new Corso puppy and the dog was being really annoying in the crate and like pawing at it and stuff like that. And he posted a video of him in bed, like reading, the puppy in the crate over there, and him with a pile of rolled up socks.
Yes.
Anytime the dog did it, nope. Threw it at the crate, right? And he stopped it doing it that. But the point is, first, the consistency and the believability of it, right? You can correct as firm as you want or as light as you want, but unless you're being consistent and following through with sending the message that it's something that I don't like first, you're only going to get so far, you know? So, yeah, you could teach it any number of ways. A leash, you don't even need a prong collar, right? With some dogs, you pick up that leash, you tell them no, and pop. Just give a little pop on it, right? The dog probably doesn't like that, right? So eventually it will start to condition in that that's something that my owner doesn't like, right? So that's most of it, you know? And just not saying no unless you're going to enforce it, you know? But by managing things really effectively, you hit a point where you don't have to say no as much, and you can make sure every no you say counts.
Right.
So that's the key with it, and that's why management is so important. And that's why one of the biggest routines I tell people to do that so many people freak out about this is 2 hours in the crate, 2 hours out of the crate with any young dog, right? The less time the dog is out of the crate, the less time for them to get into trouble, you know?
Yeah, I remember that being an issue, like, because, I mean, Huey was probably only 8-ish months old when COVID first started. And so from his 8-week-old self to then, he was used to, like, workday being in the crate all day, you know, like, from the time school started to ended, he was in his crate. And then COVID happened. Obviously, I didn't want to in his crate anymore because I was home all the time. I was like, oh, this is so great. It's all this time with my dog. And then right when we started training, he like could not be in the crate anymore. He would just like bark the whole time. And I remember you were like, you just got to put him in there and you got to make him do it. And I would sit there like at my computer, like trying to do work in the beginning. It was the first time virtual teaching, and he is just like going nuts next to me. And I remember even calling you one time. I'm like, I can't, like, when do I let him out? Because he's not stopping. I don't want to let him out and let him think like the barking works. Like, it's so stressful to let up on that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it can be really challenging, especially when you're home all the time, because you can't escape some of that stuff, but also you can't rush it, right? Some of those things you gotta just fight out for the first week or so of doing it, you know, and then from there, you know, there's other things you could do to chill them out more, but the best way they're going to learn is by removing the reinforcement of the behavior, you know? It's like we talked about with the other behavioral issues earlier.